Welcome back. Earlier today, building permits were reported, and there are two takeaways from today's number. Number one is don't trust what you read, and number two is look into the numbers. So this is just one of the articles that are out there. Not to pick on this, publication in particular, but they say U.S. housing market sends mixed signals. October new home sales fall, yet building permits rise. Now, if you were to go into this article, they talk about the fact on a month over month basis, the building permits rose 1.8%. And that is very true. Building permits, by the way, are those permits that are initiated before construction starts. Building permits are considered to be a tremendous leading indicator to the rest of the housing market because before the house is built, before the land is, finalized and everything else, the building permit is created. So we judge the housing market in the future based on the building permits now. 5 units or more on a month over month basis up 4.8%. Single family units of 0.6, 2 to 4 units down 2%. This is on a month over month basis. And again, the headline says building permits rose 1.8%. However, on a year over year basis, the overall number declined 4%. But what they also failed to mention is that the 5 units or more is down 26%. Now we break down the building permits into several categories. The overall number, that's all the building permits, 5 units or more, those are large construction projects, apartment buildings, things like that. Single family units up 14%, and then 2 to 4 units, maybe like a townhouse with, again, 2 to 4 units. Now, the reason why it's important, what we're going to show you in a second, is that the 5 units or more, the largest projects, usually have the strongest correlation to the S&P 500. So it's worth mentioning. This is what building permits look like in 2006 through 2010. The white histogram bars in the background, that's the S&P 500. Now notice, things were going well. The stock market in 2007 was chugging along, making new highs. The red line, 5 units or more. Again, these are the larger projects. That was up on a year over year basis, around 20%. The other numbers were in the decline. Now, of course, we know 2008, what was about to happen next was centered exactly around the housing market, specifically around residential, not only residential, but mostly residential. But notice what happened with the red line. As we started to go down, the red line, the 5 units or more, was really so volatile. It was the most volatile. And at one point, late 2009, it was down 80% on a year over year basis. Now, fast forward to present day, where are we now? S&P 500 is the white histogram bars in the background. Again, it looks like we're, almost ready to challenge recent swing highs. The 5 units or more is down about 20% on a year over year basis. The yellow line, 2 to 4 units, is down about 10% on a year over year basis. The single family units, that's the green line, is strong. But there are several arguments that can be made why the single family units are still strong. We say that there's a lock-in effect where those of us that own homes don't want to sell because then we'll, buy something else and all of a sudden our mortgage rates will go up to the current bracket. So maybe that's why the single family units are not moving as much. But the larger projects, the 5 units or more, is down 20% on a year over year basis. Now, what's very interesting here, take a look at each component as a percentage of all building permits. The blue area chart is the S&P 500. This goes from 2006 through present day. Now, the white line represents single family units as a percentage of all building permits. The red line represents 5 units or more as a percentage of all building permits. And then the yellow are 2 to 4. Disregard the yellow line. It's not as significant. But notice what happens during, let's say, 2008 financial recession. The white line went down a lot. The red line went up. Well, one second. Why did the 5 units or more go up in 2008? That was a financial recession, a housing market recession. It wasn't that the 5 units or more went up. It's that the single family units, the white line, as a percentage of all building permits plummeted. And that's why it represented at one point 75% of all building permits, and they went down to only 50% of all building permits. It's not that the red line, the 5 units or more, increased. Maybe that just stayed where it was. Maybe it went down a little as well. But as a percentage of all building permits, the residential, the single family homes, of course, that went down the most. And notice also, we have almost a perfect inverse correlation. When the white line goes up, the red line goes down. When the red line goes up, the white line goes down. The 2 to 4 units, it's not as consequential. Just to make it easy, think of the building permits segment of, or the report of the housing market, divide into two categories: single family units, like the homes we live in, 5 units or more, larger projects. Now, present date, where are we? Well, as a percentage of all projects, the 5 units or more did go up to around 40% about mid last year, mid 2022, but since then has declined quite precipitously. The white line, one single family units was at 50%, now around 65%. And of course, in the background, we see the S&P 500. Now, what we'll see is that the single family units here, the white line, and then the 5 units or more red line, how does this correlate with the S&P 500? The blue area chart in the background, that's the S&P 500. Our studies do indicate that the 5 units or more has a much stronger correlation to the S&P 500. And maybe that's because that the 5 units or more, when we're going to build an apartment building, it takes a lot of risk, a lot of investment capital, a lot of moving pieces. We're not going to get into these projects so quickly. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of analysis. So when we see, and especially the banks, which have the best read on the economy, when we see that, when the banks see that the economy looks like it's on shaky ground, maybe we have an inverted bond market, well, then they're going to pull back. They're not going to want to invest in large projects. They still may want to, give out a loan for a single family unit, but certainly not taking that huge risk of 5 units or more. So now we see here, it's only the S&P 500 in blue and the 5 units or more in red. And we can see very clearly the very, very strong correlation that exists up until actually very recently. Take a look at the stock market trying to challenge new highs as the 5 units or more continues to the downside. So again, we read the headline news, and again, not to pick on that particular publication, many are the same way, but they take out one little sliver and they say, well, it's up 1.4% building permits. Sure, on a month over month basis. But that's not really the big news. The big news is twofold. First of all, the 5 units or more down 20, I think what, 26%? And second of all, the 5 units or more is it's a segment of the building permits that is representative of a lot more capital, a lot more risk, and banks are much more closely related to these type of transactions. When you build a large apartment building or a large complex, the banks are involved in many, many different ways, as opposed to a single family, unit that may just involve a mortgage. So the fact that the most expensive component of the housing market measured by building permits is down on a year-over-year basis over 20%, I think that does tell us something. So I think it's worthwhile to dive into the numbers and not just to read the news at face value, but look beyond the headlines to see what the market's really telling us. We hope this has been helpful. We look forward to seeing you back soon.